So what in the world are our rogue competitors? Make sure you guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more Oz content. We're going to start off over here with Centurion. I'm going to be honest with you, it was really hard to put Centurion as a rogue competitor, but it checks the marks right now as the 11th best deck in the room, honestly. Like, if you're going to an event and you're like, I don't have to worry about Centurion, wrong, you will lose to Calamity Luck. Alright, there's a reason why people have been exploring more books and things to kind of counteract this deck. Be aware that Calamity is still sitting here in the room just because it had a slightly less showing for, the presentation of putting together the top cuts for this month. Does not mean that it checks the marks on Rogue just slightly because it was one underneath. And yeah, also my definition of Rogue is it's not like super tier 1, but it's like good enough to kind of cover your bases to do things. Next up is Minkanko. The Minkanko Diabell Star deck. We've seen Ohime and friends be really, really stupid cards. Like, let's call it what it is at this point. I'm genuinely impressed that Minkanko has maintained its seat here in the metagame as one of those decks that does continue keeping its presence in the meta. And I honestly do wholeheartedly think going forward here that if you think that Minkanko is going to be counted out as the format continues to evolve, you're probably going to be doing something wrong. That's what we call being caught with your pants down, and that's not a good thing, ever. All right, when the meta makes you feel comfortable that you forget about a deck, that's when you're most vulnerable to it. Also, people still don't know how to play against Minkanko. People look at it and they're like, oh, the damage reflection, pathetic. And it's like, no, you need to be aware of what it's doing. Yeah. All right, next up is the Runic Bysteel deck. Now, for those of you that are like, does this really count as its own thing? Yes, it does. The ability to have that massive control swing for the light and dark monsters, off of all the Bysteels eating up most of that. And then, don't even get me started on the Runic cards. One of the scariest things that this deck didn't really need to have was the fact that you could start swinging advantage with Bysteels, which means, so we're putting monsters on the field, and then we're banishing the opponent's cards, so we're forming up interruptions. Now we're using the Runic cards to generate more Bysteels to put additional monsters on the field, and then we can start getting more advantage off of Brand Regained to further filter in to more advantage. Yeah, that seems pretty broken to me at the end of this. So kind of keep that in mind. I'm really impressed with how the snowball advantage has been going with this pile of cards. Next up is Mech. Surprise, surprise, actually. Circular has definitely been catching a few more eyes as of late, and I am fairly impressed with how Circular and the rest of the deck. Also, you're playing the mini Firewall Defensor package in the deck. Honestly, I think it's the only real way to kind of approach the deck at the moment is having that Firewall stuff kind of assist you in do your thing. I've also noticed that some of the builds we've been seeing on like the regional level have been cutting back on small worlds. A lot of the lists look like they've just been opting to play 2 at this point. And to be honest with you, I think you can get away with it. It only really sucks if you do open up in the scenario and you see like 2 multiples in your opening hand. So it's why you want to attempt to reduce that number, especially if you're playing finite minings as well. But in that level of consideration, it just comes down to the deck. But also, are you strictly playing 40 if you're going down that route? Next up is Marincess. Huh? Marincess actually performed, and we didn't see a Rika Sun Avalon perform for Rogue for a top 8. Huh. Now it's interesting. Now you can make an argument the Marincess and the Rika Sun Avalon deck are pretty much interchangeable in terms of Rogue. I really do think that deck is a pretty strong thing, but if your opponent doesn't know or lets the big Marincess monster come down, and you didn't, have the Nibiru to kind of clean things up, it's protect the boss monster. You build your castle, you protect the Aqua Argonaut or whatever other boss monster you're putting on the field, and then you kind of just call it a day at that point. All right, it's the same thing that we've seen over and over again again, with the styles of boss monster decks. Doesn't mean that they're not good. It's just they do have their weaknesses. There's a reason why they're in the roguish category for things. And then, of course, we have Vanquish Soul. I still love the fact that this deck feels like the top competitor to try to beat out Rogue to beat out the meta, because you have the trap card, which is just stupid interruption. You have the big Kaiser Varius. Yeah, we all know what Kaiser tends to do in these sort of matchups. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've actually been cratered by Kaiser Varius, and it has just left me in an absolutely devastating position. Like that, most of the builds have also cut back onto one Kaiser, which is kind of interesting, because Kaiser does feel like the deck's biggest boss monster that you want to see that, but I don't know, maybe there's just a lack of fire. The reason why most of the builds play the Rise Heart, so they do have the fire monsters so that they can reveal and kind of continue along with the devastation that the combo does bring to you. Surprise, surprise. Anybody else shocked about that? I'm not. So that is the power of Vanquish Soul. Now, I am putting Phantom Knights down here. Phantom Knights do feel like a very strong competitor with the Horus package. Once again, I'm going to say, Phantom Knights with Horus feels like a very strong deck. I do not want to take that away from it. It is definitely one of the top 20 decks that you can play and do well with. I do not think that it makes the requirements to be a top 10, though. Top 20 for sure. Especially, when you're going through a lot of the Phantom Knight playlines. You Rusty Bardiche set up the double sword, or the double, Fog Blade for the interruptions, plus whatever else you're getting on the end board for that as well. It is actually pretty impressive for the end board that you can set up on for that deck. So do kind of keep in mind out here that you can set up an incredibly strong board. You can do all sorts of stupid, good, powerful things with the deck, especially, when you're starting to see the Horus package assist you with that. And it does get very, very, very dumb very quickly. Next up is the Synchro Piles. This is going to be the Junk Speeder Turbo, baby. I swear, every one of these top decks we do, it is always Junk Speeder and, hope for the absolute best out here. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, all right? But it does kind of prove like the wild theory that the deck does hold on. The deck sits at the dinner table and it's like this consistent competitor that most people tend to just kind of overlook. They're like, Junk Speeder, I got the Veiler for that. But what, anybody ever ask, what happens when you don't have the hand trap? Like, the deck already plays around Nibiru as it is. Like, you've already got problems when that scenario actually comes up. So, we have seen more people going towards Veiler in a lot of these matchups, which does help out, don't get me wrong, but it is very interesting to see some of the struggle that players are kind of seeing out here. Next up is the branded Chimera Fallen of Albaz deck. Now, this is actually a huge drop-off in the illusion stuff. And I'm actually fairly impressed, because this is where I talked about earlier in the top deck profiles video, where you saw, pure branded taking back off while you're seeing, the Chimera build go to sleep. And I don't think that that's necessarily bad. I think that it does prove that we're kind of in a format right now that, Quem and the rest of the cards you kind of get with the deck help you out in ways that maybe the other, illusion cards can't really help you with, and maybe tutoring more of the extra deck to have more coverage for the other cards is more worthwhile. And based on that, it does make sense to me, all right? Like, you want to make sure that you can cover as much as you can, and I guess the branded Chimera build is failing to do that right now. And our last rogue deck here, I gotta throw out Flunderies. Flunderies actually didn't have a single top 8 here, but I think Flunder checks the marks as the 20th best deck in the room. It is one of those decks that you look at and you go, okay, what can we do with this? What kind of, can we have success with it? Yes, you can. M-Pen is still an extremely good card. It's just, right now, M-Pen's Floodgate abilities are not what they once were. I repeat, M-Pen is not as good as it once was. And you can think a lot of the Unchained, coming back up on the top end of the representation here. People learn that, this deck can still kind of do its thing, which pressures down on Flunderies and hurts the matchup quite a lot. So, when one of the 3 best decks in the room is your bully, does tend to happen. So what do you guys think about the rogue decks for this block? Please leave a comment down below, tell me what you guys think, and I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Peace out.
Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.